Just retired and taking care of his kids. His kids are out of high school now.
Is he a single dad?
No,
No.
him and his wife. I just saw him though. Yeah,
Looks
be
like-
careful of that chair.
Okay. We're good now.
Okay.
Yep. You go ahead and start the main meeting now.
Okay. We'd like to welcome everybody to the Tuesday, June 8th Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to note that all of the planning commissioners are here with the exception of Commissioner DeMar. Do we have any public comments? Okay. With that, no action for public comments. We'll move into presentations and reports. Mr. Aggett.
Perfect. I'll just briefly note that the few items that I stated in a little more organized fashion now that I'm not as flustered. We have a new city recorder that will be joining us, I believe, on the 21st. Shaylee will continue to assist us while she's also doing double duty with her police department duties. So we'll see her a little bit, maybe more in a couple of meetings. The Chick-fil-A site plan amendment will be going to city council next Tuesday, hopefully, for their benefit, to be considered by the city council. Cafe Rio continues to move forward in their use of their space there at the Riverdale Landing Phase 2 site. The Mobetas continue, well, they got their building permit today issued. I did fail to note, there was one more I was thinking of, couldn't remember what it was. There's a new business called, let's see if I can get it right. Boathouse Seafood Restaurant, I think is what it is, or Fish House Seafood Restaurant, and it's spelled Haus. And it's over there by the Red Wing Shoes and Honey Baked
Lucky
Ham.
Buffet.
Yeah, the old Lucky Buffet space is where it's going in at. So,
That place is nasty.
so that is one I was thinking of earlier. I can't remember what it was, but they had their building permit issued today as well. So that's moving forward. No new news on I-15. I did note too, Green Hill apartment, the pool and clubhouse building permit was issued for that, and the building exterior is getting pretty far along, as well as the interior on that 42 unit building. Like I said, there are other projects that will be forthcoming. I know of a few that may not warrant an item on the agenda at our next planning commission meeting, but maybe the one thereafter, you may see a preliminary request of some kind. Just depends on who gets to the starting line first of these different projects that we're talking to. So
I noticed some equipment where Dutch Bros is going in.
oh yeah,
Are
they got their building permit issued as well. So Dutch Brothers building permit
they're
has
getting
been
ready to go.
issued.
They don't seem like they're
They
they're not huge buildings.
no, their buildings are not. The nearest one I have seen is there's one in Centerville, just off of, I think it's Parish. Is it Parish Lane? I think it's Parish
It's
Lane.
Parish- it's
Yeah,
on
it's
Parish
Parish Lane. Yeah.
It's an old Sonic
Yeah.
rather that they modified.
So that one's a little different, but that's the nearest one I know that's by our area.
They're everywhere down the West Coast.
They're in a lot of places.
I've seen them, and I was like, that's not a very big building.
I was really surprised that the one in Centerville has a line around it
They're very busy.
all the time.
Yeah.
It's just up the street from where I work.
Well, there you go. Yeah, it
It's
is because
always
yeah,
packed.
that's
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I'm excited.
And then the buildings behind it, between Lowe's and its pad, those should be demolished hopefully within the next week or two. You'll see those, so it'll look even more different over there than it does now. So, and the adjacent pad, all I can say, one of the site plans that will come forward is on the adjacent pad. And it will, you know how we did a 3-lot subdivision? They will be amending the plat, so it's a 2-lot subdivision, because the new user will use both lots together. So that much I can say.
Nice.
So yeah, things are happening.
Yeah.
So that's the report at this time.
Okay, thank you. With no consent items, we'll move to our action items. Consideration of preliminary subdivision request for Maverick Inc., located at approximately 1450 West Riverdale Road, Riverdale, Utah 84405, as requested by Eric Anderson and AWA Engineering Group. Mr. Eggett?
Thank you. And I'll just review what's in your packet in the executive summary and then hit a few points from the reports. Eric Anderson was the original applicant. Eric Anderson is no longer working for Maverick. I'm not sure if, I believe that she must be representing Maverick's interest in this application. So
Joe Turber.
there you go. Joe Turberger is her name. So she'll be representing Maverick's interest here. AWA Engineering Group is the engineering firm on this. Submitted their application for the preliminary subdivision. It's located at 1450 West Riverdale Road on the current Gibby Floral corner. In a contingently zoned regional commercial C3 zone, contingent upon the site plan being approved by the city council for the Mavericks use of the property. Subdivision is on existing floral business, and the property is currently owned by Whitewell York LLC. No public hearing is required for this consideration. The Planning Commission is the decision-making body on this, and obviously, depending on what decision is made, if a preliminary approval is provided, then this matter can move forward to a future final subdivision recommendation consideration process. And I believe Mavericks and AWA's intent is for that to then dovetail into a final site plan submission as well at that time. So you'll see both of them marry up to each other and come forward together. And as noted earlier in the work session, the site plan documents have been significantly changed and updated to match the subdivision. So, the general plan use for the area is set as planned commercial high. This use does comply with that. My noted comments are found on page 5. Under project name and address, I just have the address location for both lots need to be determined working with city staff. I've worked with AWA planning. I just need to figure out those numbers, and they can easily put that on there. I did note under property owner's name on the plat itself, it has Maverick listed as the property owner, but it's a 2-lot subdivision. So I just noted, what about Gibby lots ownership? Obviously, if they're an owner, they probably should be identified on that plat as well. Maybe even say lot 1, Maverick, and their address lot 2, Gibby family, or Whitewell York LLC, if that's still the owner that's representing Gibby family's interest. Under approving agency's name, I just put if any other utility agency's name or contact information are provided, that should be shown where applicable. May not be necessary. Moving on to page 7 in your packet. Under UDOT approval, I put this project needs to be discussed and cleared with UDOT due to intersection 1500 West with Riverdale Road. So obviously where it's corner property, it's going to have, like I said, there's some significant development growth pressures and strain that are going to come on this property pretty quickly depending on how things go north of this.
Huge intersection.
And as a result, it's going to not only see potentially impact of more vehicles, but obviously it's going to have fuel tankers and other uses going in there for Maverick itself. And so the road will need to be able to accommodate those kind of movements in and out and around that. So that intersection, they'll need to make sure UDOT is working. And I know AWA engineers are working on that. I've talked to them about that, but that is a note I have here. Under water rights transfer documentation, applicant needs to work with Public Works Department to provide adequate water rights for the site per 8-6-3 of City Code. And again, AWA is becoming quickly familiar with that process on other projects, so I imagine that they're already trying to figure out how to address that. And that is more linked into the site plan process typically, but it is still something that we could note as part of the subdivision. Under the staff reports, Mr. Douglas, the Public Works Director, has no concern with the subdivision document. The chief has no concerns. The fire chief has no concerns as well, and the fire marshal has no concerns. Yeah, the fire chief is definitely a fan. Under the city engineer, he has a few, probably more engineering-related comments, and I believe Mr. Burke can share that with AWA engineers. There's multiple things about the plat, talking about drawing boundary, section ties, correction adjustments to the plat for closure, those sorts of things that are kind of more engineering related. If there's any questions about the engineer's comments, I would have AWA engineer contact our city engineer to work through those items. He's wanting to make sure that the signature block is reworded at the bottom for the city engineer. He has a statement he likes to have included a certain way. On the plat, all easements and right-of-ways should be shown, and then he lists where he's referencing the easements and right-of-ways that either need to be better clarified or even shown. He's noting, we believe UDOT will request a no access note along Riverdale Road. Approval and comments will need to be requested from UDOT in regards to the plat for our office. Lot address says traffic study. That's something that I believe AWA engineers have already entered into as it relates to Maverick as well as neighboring property owners' interests. So that study should be done, but that study does need to be, findings will need to be provided to our city engineer is what he's requesting, so he can make sure he's aware of how those impacts are related to this intersection, and they're queued in there. Upon completion approval of the plat, the current date will need to be added below the drawing title. So those are his comments. You'll see the application thereafter for the 2-lot subdivision on the 4.476 acres in the C3 zone. Everything's been paid for by the applicants and signed off by the property owner via DigiSign. And you'll see the plat thereafter. So that's pretty much everything I have on this one. And I defer to you as planning commissioners if you have any questions for me or for Maverick and their work on this project. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Wanda, do you have any comments or questions?
I already had one question. Okay, I know there's 2 lots there, but behind the lot number 1, is that going to be where Gimme Forest is? Is that lot number 3?
Gibby Flora will be demolished and removed, and the Maverick will see where it says existing building in the corner. That's the Gibby Flora building as it now currently stands. So the subdivision is just showing the existing buildings, but all 3 of those buildings will be demolished as a component of this new site use.
So all the property that Gibby's own is going to be included in lot number 1 and number 2?
That's correct.
Okay. That's the only question I really had.
I thought lot 2 is Gibby's are keeping,
They will keep it, but it's all subject to the subdivision.
so Maverick can use it.
Well, meaning Gibby's will retain lot 2, but obviously for the purposes of the subdivision, all the property that's in part of the subdivision is currently owned by Gibby.
Okay.
And I think that's what Wanda was asking.
Okay.
They're only leasing this or loaning this to Maverick, right?
Yes, that's correct. Lot 1 will be.
Matt?
I don't know if it will be sold or leased. I believe. That's what I believe it is to a purchase. Yeah. So they will own lot 1, and then the Gibby Floral / Whitewell York will continue to use lot 2. I will say very carefully that the Gibby family does have other interests in lot 2 for the future.
Now, we do not have UDOT's information yet, right? They haven't done the study yet?
No, and obviously prior to a site plan or subdivision approval, that would need to be vetted and cleared with UDOT in a letter saying that they were good and they had a plan in place.
But what we're doing tonight is a preliminary, is that correct?
Yeah, just the preliminary subdivision. That's correct. So just to be clear, Commissioner Nye, this will obviously come back to the Planning Commission at a later date for a recommendation to City Council review.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the preliminary subdivision request for Maverick located at approximately 1450 West Riverdale Road as requested by Maverick and AWA Engineering Group.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Should we pull the?
Do you want to poll the commissioners, Mike? Or are we okay?
You could. It sounds like I got a unanimous motion.
Yeah.
Did I hear Commissioner Nye?
Oh,
I didn't hear Commissioner Nye.
Aye.
There you go. Okay, so I have a unanimous motion, so that should be sufficient.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion carries.
yep. Motion passes.
Okay. We're good.
Okay, we'll move on to number 2, presentation and discussion of legislative summary impacts from from recent legislative session. Mr. Reagan?
Okay, now to the exciting meat and potatoes. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
I appreciate your report and all of your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll let you handle the rest.
You don't want to stay and enjoy this? This is really fun
This is
stuff.
the fun part.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. You too. All right. So digging now in, there's 3 bills that I'm going to go into, and I'm going to try to articulate them in a simple but maybe not overly in-depth way, if that's possible, because there's a lot more that could be said for each of these. But if you have questions along the way or you need more information, let me know, and I can either try to explain it now or I can get it for you later. But I feel like it's important for you to understand, because this does drive some of the decisions that we will have to make with our code in Title 10. A lot of these changes have to be done by or before October 1st of this year, all the way through City Council. So, don't turn off on me, computer. Let me make sure it's still recording. Is that light? Yeah. Sorry. It decided to go to sleep on me. I just want to make sure. Okay, we're still good. All right. Anyway, so I'll go through 3 of these and try not to use too much of your time, but they are important to note. The first one is House Bill 82, Single Family Housing Modifications. It was presented by Representative Ray Ward as the sponsor and Senator Anderegg in the Senate. Legislative purpose of the bill mandates internal accessory dwelling units, or IADUs, as a permitted use with certain exceptions, enacts enforcement mechanisms, modifies the building code to exempt IADUs, establishes a loan program for IADUs, and prohibits a homeowner association from banning IADUs. Obviously, an IADU is a single family dwelling that it can be located in the same home as one that an owner occupies as a primary residence, and the dwelling is detached somehow internally in the home. That's what an IADU is. So if you're wondering what that's defined as, that's what it's defined as. In an area zoned primarily for residential use, a determination up to the municipality, which would be all of our residential zones that are all the way up to R-1-6. R-1-6, the code says we do not have to accommodate IADUs. So 6,000 square foot or larger densities, multifamily, it does not qualify for those types of housing areas. So do take note of that. Anyway,
6,000 foot or larger or smaller?
Smaller. When I say, yeah, that you're right. That's what I mean. You're right. Like when I say larger, like more dense. Yeah.
Okay.
6,000 square feet or more dense. Thank you for the clarification. That's correct. So obviously, multifamily, it won't apply, and that sort of thing. However, a municipality may prohibit IADUs in 25% or less of the total area in the municipality zone for primarily residential. So what that allows is for us as a planning commission to scrutinize our zoning map where it would be allowed and determine up to 25% of the area that makes the most sense logically for the city to say these areas are not subject to that. Now, how do we establish that by code? I don't know. And it may be just as easy to say everything from R1A, R110, R2, A1 is applied, or maybe everything but A1 it's allowed. I don't know. We'll have to see if we do it by zone and certain zoning definitions. That seems to be probably the easiest way by code, is to determine which zones we would be comfortable as a planning commission, as a city, allowing IADUs in. As you look at that map, the majority of the residential areas on that map over there are R2 and R110. So probably those zones, it's going to be, that's probably the best recommendation to consider them being allowed in, is R110, R2.
So will they let us determine which zones?
We as a city can determine, but we only are allowed to remove 25% of the total area in the municipality zone for primarily residential. So I take that back. It's not just qualifying areas; it's total areas. So it does include the multifamilies and the mobile home parks. So that right there might be our 25th percentile. We may not have any choice but to have IADUs be applied in all residential zones that are zoned larger than R16. So I'll look at that analysis and bring that forward to you. We may, just by the very limitation of how our city is set up, already meet or exceed that. So we'll see. It says, however, House Bill 82 allows a municipality to adopt the following IADU restrictions and requirements. And what I might have to do is bullet point these as a menu and see which ones you think would be appropriate to apply. We already have a few in the R, because the R2 zone already allows for this. Just so you're aware, if you're not aware of that, it already does. So what I was thinking is we would take the R2 zone, expand it into this, and add maybe additional criteria if we feel like they're appropriate to apply for individuals who want to do IADUs in other areas of the community. But this is the list that the state says that we can add as restrictions and requirements. It says require bedroom window egress, prohibit installation of a separate utility meter, require that the IADU design does not change, or IADU design not change the appearance of the primary dwelling, which ours already does that. Require one additional on-site parking space and replace any garage or carport parking spaces if the IADU is created in the garage or carport. Ours pretty much does that as well as currently written. Prohibit an IADU in a mobile home, which, so we could, maybe that's how we do our 25%. I'll have to talk to our attorney and see how that works. I didn't think they were allowed in mobile homes, but this makes it sound like they would be. Require an IADU permit or
Thought it
license.
said prohibit it, so.
We can prohibit it, and maybe we just outright prohibit it to make our jobs easier if we can get away with still covering that 25th percentile. Require an IADU permit or license. Prohibit an IADU if the primary dwelling is served by a failing septic tank. Prohibit an IADU if the lot is 6,000 square feet or less, and that's where that one comes in. And so we would need to make sure that clearly that that's one that we want to adopt. I think it makes sense too, where otherwise we would have multiple family zoning that would have potential issues here. Prohibit the renting of the IADU for less than 30 consecutive days. So that's how you control the, what do you want to call those? The
VRBOs.
Yeah, VRBOs, the rental home type situations. And prohibit renting an IDU that is not in an owner-occupied primary dwelling. So those are the restrictions. Pretty long list. They're trying to give cities as much flexibility, but saying you're still going to do it. But here's the requirements you can create, so you can still try to have a safe, harmonious community for those people that want to do it. So, and the thing is, we have to remember too, it will eventually go to city council, and they may say, I don't like that one, I don't like that one, but at least we can do our best efforts in presenting to the city council and see what they think. The above IEDU provisions go into effect October 1st, 2021. There is something interesting here, and this will come into play too. HB 82 also modifies the definition of single-family limit in LUDMA so that whether individuals occupying a dwelling are related or not is irrelevant. So I'm not sure how to grapple with changing that definition in our code, because we do have language that says unrelated and not related in our current definition. So I've got to find a way that makes sense to marry that up to this change. And I'm not quite sure I figured it out, but I'll work on it. Maybe when I bring it to the commission, you can give me an idea that makes sense to fit this change. HB 82 also modified the state construction code to create certain exemptions for ADUs for wall thickness, ventilation, and other changes. By October 1, 2021, the municipality should review those zones that are primarily residential and adopt an ordinance permitting IDUs if they are not permitted already. However, if the municipality chooses to, I've already talked about that, the municipality should also identify a zoning district covering as applicable an area equivalent to 25% or less of the total area in the municipality that is zoned primarily residential and excludes IADUs in those areas. The IADU ordinance should also adopt any restrictions that the municipality finds necessary and appropriate under House Bill 82, which is that list of things I noted. And the municipality should also amend an ordinance setting a single-family limit based on whether individuals are related to each other and note the changes in the building code for IADUs. So, long and short, that's what that one does. So, we'll work through that. The next one is House Bill 98, Local Government Building Regulation Amendments. This one doesn't affect us directly as much, but you should be aware it was one of the big ones, and it actually had a recent amendment in the legislative session that they did. Here was it in May, maybe the end of May, I think they had a legislative session that they convened. They amended this and tightened some things up on it. Bill establishes for a one or two family dwelling or townhome clear timelines for a municipality to complete plan reviews and inspections and prohibits a municipality from requiring certain design elements. That's not very hard for us to hit, but what it does do is it allows a third-party licensed building inspector to come in independently if the city fails to meet its requirement of turning over plan reviews within 14 days. and they can go in with a third party and do an inspection, and then they have to deliver reports and that sort of thing, and show how the building permit is allowed in the community, and there's certain criteria there without boring you with the details. But it also makes it so it's near impossible by code to establish multiple design elements for one or two family dwellings or townhomes, as far as coloration, material, architectural styling of windows or doors, ornamental features, locations, placement of the lot, or the home on the lot, excuse me. Obviously, setbacks still are applied, but I think some cities were like saying your footprint, it has to be this way or this way or this way. And it's saying, no, you can't do that. There's a lot more to it. It's a super long list. I think I would bore you if I told you, but if you're curious what the list is, let me know, and I can, again, share that with you. It's a very long list. It's just basically saying you really can't tell developers how they're going to design the one or two family dwellings or townhomes, except for design elements, including a local historic district, elements agreed to under a development agreement, a dwelling located in an area substantially developed before 1950, and an ordinance requiring materials that are not defective in a planned unit development. And the amendment added areas within a floodplain area, because that was one of the reasons that the governor had issue with this in the first place. And he technically did veto it, but the reason I'm sharing it with you now is because it's in place with the amendment. Yeah, so municipalities should review their building inspection and plan review process to ensure that all departments and individuals involved with the process can successfully meet deadlines. Municipalities should also update their design element ordinances to align with the prohibitions and prohibition exceptions in House Bill 98. So there's that one. The final one is Municipal and County Land Use and Development, House Bill 409, by Representative Steve Waldrop and Senator McKay. And the legislative purpose of the bill: House Bill 409 reflects the work of the 2020 Land Use Task Force, changing multiple provisions in Title 10, Chapter 9A, Municipal Land Use Development and Management Act, excuse me, which is our basically guide as far as what land use behaviors and practices we're entitled to as a city from the state, gifted from the state. That's kind of how they look at it. So they've made some standards that they've tied up and kind of further defined in order to, I don't know necessarily limit, but guide cities on what's required. So the first one does directly affect planning commissioners. Under House Bill 409, planning commissioners in SB 34 municipalities, which we are, due to our location within Weber County, must complete 4 hours of annual land use training, and a municipality must adopt objective standards for conditional uses. The bill prohibits a municipality for a period of 10 years after the day on which a subdivision plat is recorded from imposing on a building permit for a single-family dwelling in the subdivision any land use regulation that is enacted within 10 years after the day the subdivision plat is recorded. This prohibition is to address land use vesting issues. So there's two things in that paragraph, but the first one obviously is training. Now this is what's interesting about the training. They say they want 4 hours of annual land use training, and then we have to adopt objective standards for conditional uses. I think our standards meet that requirement. I'm gonna check with our city attorney and see if we need to do anything with conditional uses, but I think the way they're listed A through G, they're very well defined. They're objective, they make sense. I don't think they're onerous. I've never seen, in my time being here, any planning commission deny a conditional use permit request. So I have a feeling that says something about it. Other cities may be a little more, how should I say this, subjective in their application of their conditional use, and maybe that's why it's being noted here this way to be addressed. As far as the planning or the training goes, though, it's not clear what kind of land use training that looks like. You know, me doing this very thing right now, it may qualify for land use training. You attending when I get an opportunity through ULCT to attend some training, you know, if you do an hour, 2 or 3, and you feel like you've hit 4 hours, great. I don't know that there's going to be a tracker. I don't know if someone's going to come through the city and say, Riverdale City, show us proof that you've had 4 hours of land use training. But I think that they want to make sure that you're getting the resources and the guidance and the opportunities to be trained. So it probably puts more burden on myself and even the city attorney to make sure we're sharing information with you. But when I send those training opportunities to you, please do take advantage of them, because they do help us to more readily check that box So I can say that we're meeting that requirement, especially if I could show evidence and proof beyond just, hey, we had it in our meeting and training on this. If I can show proof I have commissioners attending those meetings, that goes a lot further in showing that. I don't know that we would ever get audited, if that's the right term, but clearly the state putting this into a bill and then approving it, they want planning commissioners to be under scrutiny to get training, land use training annually for 4
Well,
hours.
years ago, we used to have videos.
Yeah. And the land use ombudsman does provide those, so it may be in the best interest to start running those now that we're in person again. That's going to be a lot easier. Obviously, with Zoom and stuff or WebEx, that would have been pretty impossible. But maybe now we can more readily do that. So, and we're becoming more sophisticated. I mean, we have a gigantic TV now, so maybe there's a way to broadcast on that gigantic TV some of those videos pretty easily from this computer. So I'll have to explore that with our technology team, but. The legislation, this is more of these land use development area changes. The legislation defines development agreement and their appropriate uses. These provisions are a response to recent case law regarding prohibited contract zoning. So I think I haven't looked closely at what that changes, but my suspicion is that in the past, cities were using development agreements to get around their zoning codes. So you'd have a zoning standard, but if you had a developer come in and they made a sideways agreement with you and you created a development agreement, somehow you could get around being fair and equal to all applicants. So then the next guy comes in and says, well, why didn't I get that deal? Well, you don't have a development agreement with us, so we don't have to honor that agreement with you. I think this code is an effort by the legislature to say no more of that behavior. But I'll have to look at it more. But I've even had developers try to use that tactic on us, and our city attorney is very clear. We do not go against our code. And I never have, but it's interesting how some developers will even try to say, well, I don't want to say this disparagingly you, but my circumstances are special or I'm special because look what I'm doing. Work something out with me and let's do a development agreement. It's like, no, we have codes. We follow our codes. That's just the standard. So, but I have a feeling that that's where that's coming from. The bottom, I think this is the last part of it. House Bill 409 amended several provisions to clarify lot line adjustments, boundary line agreements, and subdivisions. The clarifications include that a parcel boundary adjustment is not subject to land use authority review except in certain circumstances, and that recording of a boundary line agreement does not constitute a land use approval. A municipality may withhold approval of a land use application that is subject to recorded boundary line agreement if the lots or parcels are not in compliance with land use regulations. The bill also sets requirements for adjoining property owners executing a boundary line agreement and clarifies that a boundary line agreement that only affects parcels is not subject to land use authority or engineering review. The reason I share that with you, it creates a lot of gray areas. If you and a neighboring property owner want to adjust your boundary line, the code has been my entire career been ambiguous. Is it a land use authority review? Is it something between the property owners? And then the county, because they're confused, will bounce it back and say, you have to go take this to your land use authority. And I keep seeing them trying to address this over different legislative sessions and changing it, tweaking it, trying to get to the point where if you and a neighboring property owner go and do a boundary line adjustment and go through what the state code requires, you can do it internally. Even currently, we've been doing that without it going to a land use review. Could you imagine doing a subdivision plat for just changing a common boundary line between you and your neighboring property owner, but then having to go and get all the signatures from people in your subdivision? I mean, that's some of the challenges. When I started my career, that was what you had to do to amend a property line in your subdivision. So this is trying to make that easier. But what the county still is doing right now, and maybe this will change as a result of this bill, I in some ways hope so, they bounce it back and then they require that I have somebody with the city sign off on their plat saying that we've corrected it and it's true and correct and we support it, which I don't know that that's required, and I think this will hopefully make that even less required. I do request when there are boundary line agreements or adjustments that they bring it in and talk to me and show me, and I do request that they provide us with a copy of the plat so we have it in our records. That's just been a practice I've done working here. I don't always get the luxury of that and sometimes stumble into a time where something's been recorded and we have no knowledge and it just shows up on the county documents and there it is and we have to figure it out. But hopefully this still put some responsibility and burden on property owners to make cities aware of it. But this has been a tough challenge. Sometimes somebody wants to just change a fence line, or sometimes people will own two properties that are on two separate lots and they want to absorb them together. And this process has been kind of convoluted. What do you do in that situation, right? So I believe that we as a city are already doing this. I believe we were doing this maybe even more so before this was approved as far as our policies. It'll be interesting to see how the county proceeds. Obviously, with the subdivision, the benefit of that is making all the legal descriptions and information much easier to understand and record for engineers and future surveyors. But there are other tools that are available if you're just a simple homeowner that wants to do a boundary adjustment with your neighbors. So anyway, that's enough on that. Really, I think that's the long and short of what's been changed. The other one is just talking about changes to the authorities, the land use development authorities that the state has created, that with the Utah Inland Port Authority, Point of the Mountain State Authority, and the Military Installation Development Authority. The one that affects our city boundaries is the MIDA, Military Installation Development Authority with Falcon Hill. But again, they have their own land use staff, and they really would need to know what those changes are. So it doesn't really affect us directly. And with that, that's pretty much it. Those three that I talked about are the big three that affect what we do. So I hope I wasn't too dry. I tried not to be, but you should
You're
know.
awesome.
You should
You're
know.
awesome.
So if you have any other questions for me, that's all I have, or we can go from there and follow the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. Do we have any discretionary items?
I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Wait, I have a
Oh,
question.
sorry. Okay.
And I don't know if I should ask off record or on record.
I do want to note election. Obviously, you probably have seen candidacy closed yesterday, and so hopefully you've had a chance to see the candidacy for mayor and city council. We have four.
Who's running for mayor?
It's Braden Mitchell and Doug Peterson that are on for mayor.
Wow,
Oh, wow, yeah,
that shocks me.
So that's going to be the mayoral. So that'll be an interesting mayoral season.
Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yep. So it'll be an interesting cycle. See how that goes. And then city council members are. Let's see how well I remember. I think his name is Jeremy Savage. Let's hope I get this right. If you're listening, I apologize for getting your name wrong. Jeremy Savage, Karina Merrill, Bart Stevens, and Annie Hansen are your city council applicants. So
And is this for one seat?
it's two. Brent Ellis is not running.
Okay.
It'll be his seat, and then
And
Bart
Bart's
Stevens
seat.
is running again for his seat. Yeah. So that's what will happen. And were Braden to be mayor, obviously that would vacate his seat for 2 years. I don't know if that would be an appointment or a election at the time, but obviously that's a bridge we'll cross whenever we get there after November. So
Okay.
Thank you. How many chickens are we allowed in this city?
it's not
Is it-
regulated. It's not really regulated.
Residential, you can't have chickens.
You actually can.
You can?
Yeah.
They
It's not.
said in that one meeting, don't ask, don't tell. But they said in residential, you're not allowed to have any livestock, only in agricultural.
That's not entirely true.
I'm just telling you what they had in the paper about it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was my neighbor that was one of the ones that was.
The
trying to
status
allow
is
them to have
you can
chickens.
have chickens and animals.
And
in
there's no
city.
limit on, like,
Not
you can have
not real.
20 chickens?
It's enforced by code enforcement and animal control enforcement. So sight,
talk
sound,
to Kim?
smells. Yep. You either talk to Kim or you talk to Randy.
So
on
anybody
that
can just get a
issue.
rooster or whatever.
Roosters
If a
roosters fall
rooster
into
happens, you guys are
that
gonna
sounds
see me
that
get a
falls into
gun.
sound enforcement. And typically animal control will confiscate the rooster from the property.
Oh, I'll
How
freak
are they going
out.
to do that though? I mean, if they say you can have chickens, how are they going to say, well, you can't have males, but you can only have females?
That's how the standard has been applied over the years.
So,
Are they
under sound enforcement?
Sound enforcement.
Are they supposed to be taking
nuisance
care of
enforcement.
them?
Yes.
So they're not flying all over the neighborhood?
And residential complaints can be provided to the code enforcement and animal control officers. Yeah.
Since when did they change it
You
that
got chickens in
residential
your
you can have
neighborhood?
agricultural?
Yeah.
Well, chickens are considered
Really?
pets or household animals.
There's a farm.
If they're in a chicken coop, they're considered a pet?
Yeah.
Is it a cow, a horse,
Cow,
anything else?
cow and horse is clarified in the code very clearly. Yeah.
I don't know, they must have changed it then, because I know
The animals are very clearly
12 years
down in
ago,
the code.
they had a big issue about it, and what they finally said in the city council meeting was, you're not allowed to have farm animals in any residential area because it's not zoned for it. So you can, if you have them, don't ask, don't tell.
Corporate memory does not seem to think that that's the case. How's that? I wasn't here when that conversation happened, but that's what corporate memory has guided me to do. So
'Cause I can even tell you the council person that said, don't ask, don't tell, and that was Shelley Jenkins.
yeah, that the corporate memory is that if there are nuisances and they're household animals and they're small, like a dog or a cat or any other bird or other animal or even potbelly pig, that they're enforced with animal control or code enforcement issues. So
Yeah, but a potbelly pig, I understand, is not raised for food.
well, this is
Chickens
probably a great
raised for
discussion to
food.
have with the city attorney outside this mission.
Yeah.
We're starting to get into a discussion we should not be having on the record. Let's put
Okay,
it that way.
sorry. Yeah. Okay,
I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Right.